Hello, it's Martin, and it's that time of year when I'm back in Slovakia visiting my family. So I thought I would take this opportunity to show you around my mum's BMW i3 because, as we often say at Wisely Automotive, when you are buying a used car, you can't always pick the options you want. But with this one, we were on the market for a very long time, and we were lucky because this is basically as close as it gets to the perfect i3 spec. Visually, let's start with the color, and it is the very distinct bright protonic blue. We really like it. I know it splits a lot of opinion, but with i3s you always get the dark bonnet, dark roof and dark tailgate, so we think the bright color gives it a really nice contrast and it suits the futuristic character of the i3. With the protonic blue paint you automatically get grey accents instead of protonic blue, because otherwise that would color clash. Same goes for if you go for any of the bright colors on the i3 like the red, the yellow, etc. Some of the blue accents are deleted then. On the wheels front, this is a sensible and visually appealing choice at the same time. They are the 428 style wheels, which in our eyes are the best looking wheels. They're automatically staggered, but crucially being 19-inch, you get a tire with a bit more sidewall. In other words, you get a bit more comfort, and at the same time they are still quite aerodynamic, so you get good real-world range and efficiency. On this particular car, the tires are different front to back because you cannot get winter tires in that wider dimension. If that doesn't make any sense to you, don't you worry, I've already made a video about how the i3 handles in winter. I will leave that in the top right hand corner so you can check that out. But basically what I'm trying to say, do as I say, not as I do. You should get a square setup of winter wheels with dedicated winter tires with the same brand and same type all around. And lastly, on the visual side of things, on the interior front, we have got this standard Atelier interior, which I know you may think is a little bit of a bizarre choice, but again, it is actually my favorite. It features the cloth upholstery, which is made from a lot of recycled material, so this is the one which tends to be the most eco-friendly, and it's also very practical. So with some of the other interiors like Loft and Lodge, yes, they do look absolutely stunning, and my personal i3 used to have the Lodge interior, but it's quite difficult to take care of, especially if you jump in with a wet jacket. The fabric will stay, whereas with this it is pretty much indistinguishable. This interior hasn't been cleaned in a very long time, so excuse the mess in the car. It is used on a daily basis, but it's a really hard wearing interior, and despite the car having done about 100,000 kilometers or about 62,000 miles, the side bolsters are still in practically perfect condition. And in this case, the base interior comes with a lot of these bright blue accents, so it goes particularly well with the protonic blue exterior. Drivetrain-wise, as you could tell probably from the front, it is the pre-facelift car, but it is the upgraded middle battery, so the 94 amp hour, and that came with some standard equipment, like for example CCS DC rapid charging, even though I think this car has seen a DC charger maybe 2 or 3 times in its entire ownership with us. So, closing that, if we move to the front, you will see that there is no filler flap, and that's because this is a full electric i3, and that's definitely the way I would have an i3, and we haven't really missed the Rex once. This car mostly does town driving, it gets recharged every night and then it's ready for the next day. But let's talk about the most interesting aspect, and that's the features, because with i3s it was an a la carte menu, so no i3 is the same. So here I will try to reason why we decided to look out for cars with these features and what you can learn from it yourself. Starting with the front, you will see that it comes with the full LED headlights. Truth to be told, on pre-facelifts, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Functionally, they just look a lot better. Without the LED lights, they come with a reflector design within the headlamp, whereas now they've got projectors with the nice little BMW LED inscription inside. It just looks a little bit more high-end. The high beams are still halogen on these pre-facelift cars, and so are the indicators in the corners of these bottom clusters, so I'm afraid it's not a full LED setup anyways. Other than that, we've got front parking sensors, so that tells you that this car comes with the parking package, because on i3s all of the parking options were bundled in together. So we have got the front parking sensors, the side parking sensors for automated parallel parking, and the reversing camera. Truthfully, this being quite a compact car, I think you can completely do away without the front sensor, because having the rear camera is quite nice, despite the rear visibility being good. It just helps you with maneuvering, and you should be less likely to scuff your precious alloy wheels. Next up, this is very easy to tell from the outside. It does have adaptive cruise control because it has the windscreen mounted front camera. Again, on i3s, adaptive cruise control and all the active safety features are bundled into one package, which is called the Driving Assistant Plus. So, as base, the car doesn't have any of that. And while the adaptive cruise control is not the best, and this particular car being mostly used in the city, my mum pretty much never uses it, but it's nice to know that it is monitoring the area ahead of the vehicle, and even if you are driving fully manually, if a pedestrian steps out ahead of the car in the daytime or the car in front slams on the brakes, you will get an acoustic warning, and in some scenarios the i3 slams on the brakes as well. And you know, if that saves you the bumper once, it basically paid for itself. Moving down the side, we've got comfort access, and this is a bit of a point of contention in the UK because yes, it is how cars get nicked. However, this is Slovakia, and we live in a house where the keys are very far away from the vehicle, so relay attacks are very unlikely, and it sits in a locked garage, so you would really have to try hard. And it's one of the features which my mum really loves, and I have to agree, because like for example right now I've got the keys in one of my pockets, I don't even know where they are, but if I go up to the car, the door unlocks, and you can spot that it has comfort access based on these ridges on the door handle. You can just press and hold, and it will lock, and it will also fold the mirrors in. Very handy for daily use when you are jumping in and out of the car very often. We have discussed the charging side of things, and yeah, there's not much else to see on the back other than the fact that yes, it does indeed have the reversing camera in the rear bumper as mentioned. Many people wonder why this area is blanked off on their i3, and it's because you only get these controls for opening the boot and the bonnet with the comfort access package. And speaking of that, let's open the bonnet to see what's underneath. And actually we'll not see much, but there is a granny charger which probably hasn't been used in ever. And if we removed some of these covers, if you look really deep down into here, you will see that there is some extra plumbing, and that is because this car comes with a heat pump. Now, when we were buying the i3, it was our first EV in the family, I thought heat pump is a big deal, and yes, it helps, especially in our scenario, with the car essentially starts from not a cold state every morning because it is in the garage, which isn't technically heated, but you know, it's always 10-15 degrees Celsius in there. So the heat pump only has to maintain cabin temperature, and it makes the car really efficient. Even in the winter, it really helps make the range very stable. However, I would say you can always do without it, especially in the UK it's quite a rare option, so I wouldn't limit myself to that anymore. In fact, if you want to know how much of a difference the heat pump makes to range and efficiency, we have done a video on the Wisely Automotive channel comparing two cars side by side and seeing what the difference is in the real world conditions. So again, that will be linked in the top right hand corner. The other thing which lives under the bonnet, which you can't really see, is the acoustic pedestrian warning, which is the speaker which lives in the front bumper and it makes a humming sound. On these older i3s, it is a little bit less pronounced than on the newer ones when it became mandatory, and it can be still turned off. But again, one of those things that it's nice to have, definitely not essential. On the actual interior features, we had to go for the professional sat-nav screen, even though we rarely use the built-in sat-nav because the car does the same journeys day in, day out. It just makes the interior feel a lot more futuristic, and it's the right choice that BMW made it standard going forward, other than in the most recent years where the part supply shortages affected the production of the i3 and they went back to the business nav. In my eyes, you really have to have the big screen if you want the best i3 experience. With the 94 amp hour battery, the heated seats became standard, which is not just for seat heating, but it also means that the i3 now has a standard fit battery heater. And the last thing which is worth pointing out is the enhanced Bluetooth package. This is a little bit old school because these early i3s came with a dedicated cradle for your mobile phone. Honestly, It's probably a bit of a drawback these days on the early cars, because there's no way you will bother getting the cradle, and it just means that you have got extra stuff in the central armrest. So the best scenario would have been actually to omit this, so you can put your phone in there, or on the later facelift i3s you can then get a wireless charger in here as part of the package, which is a much more sensible option. But even then, something like an iPhone 15 Pro, it just about fits in there, whereas if you have any of the Max or Plus sized iPhones, they will be too big even without a case. Let's move on to the features the car doesn't have, because that's how many of these full spec examples are defined. It's a full spec, but it's missing something, and in this case it doesn't have the sunroof, as you can see. That was actually an intentional decision. We could choose between two vehicles, one with and one without the sunroof, and in my eyes the ones without the sunroof are superior. Firstly, a sunroof on the i3 opens, so it's an extra mechanical component with moving parts which can go wrong. And on top of that, it goes against the ethos of the i3. It's quite a small sunroof. All i3s get a bright headliner anyways. And importantly, if you go for the sunroof, you get an aluminium roof panel, whereas with this, it's proper carbon fiber, keeping it in line with the lightweight design of the i3. Next up, it's the sound system. So this car doesn't have the upgraded Harman Kardon sound, which means that you only get two pairs of speakers in the front footwells, handling the woofer range, and higher tones are handled by a pair in the door cards. And that's it. My personal i3 used to have the Harman Kardon sound system. I'm not much of an audiophile, but I thought it would be a nice to have. But realistically, yes, you get more speakers with more volume, but in my eyes, not much clarity, and without a dedicated subwoofer, not much bass either. It's interesting because in my Mini Electric, the Harman Kardon sound system sounded amazing. So here, while it would have been nice to have, especially for rear passengers, because with the bass system there are no speakers in the back, and somehow the acoustics of the i3 mean that if you crank up the volume in the front with the bass system, you still don't get much volume in the back. But my mum drives usually alone, and to be fair, with the radio off. So she's not missing out on the upgraded sound system, but it's something to keep in mind if you plan to have passengers in the back very often. And lastly, let's address the lack of leather interior. Once again, this was an intentional choice. In Slovakia, it gets very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. And the cloth upholstery is probably the best choice comfort-wise. As I mentioned already, you have got the eco credentials on top. So in my eyes, the only reason to go for the leather is not because of the premium feeling, because this interior still feels nice and special, is for practicality. If you have kids or pets and you will have lots of spillage in the back and you just want to wipe it off, fair enough, the leather makes sense. But for me personally, I don't really feel the need to sit on the skin of a dead cow, so the cloth interior does just fine. And if you really want to spruce it up, you can always get the dark oud wooden trims for the dashboard. There is no denying that one aspect which the car is missing is the facelift. And yes, it would have been lovely to have the newer version of the i3, which has the slimmed down headlights, which now feature full LED technology, and the newer infotainment system, which while has the same size screen, it runs the newer head unit with the newer software, which also supports Apple CarPlay. And all of us in the family are iPhone users, so it would have been quite nice. But you know, it is what it is. The other thing obviously would have been the bigger battery if we waited a little bit longer. But realistically, we are not even reaching the limits in daily use of this 94 amp hour battery, so the bigger battery is not really needed. And you have to keep in mind, whenever you are buying a used car, you have got a certain budget, and you can decide how you go about it. Firstly, we bought this car in about 2019. It's a 2017 car, so we have had it since it was 2 years old. And it means that in all of these years we have saved a ton of money on petrol, and it served us really, really nicely. Secondly, even if we were in the market now, you have got a choice to make. Do we go for a slightly older 94 amp hour, which is basically fully spec'd like this car, or do we go for a basic 120 amp hour, which has almost no equipment, just a little bit of extra range? And for many people, I would argue, especially if you're after a premium car like the i3 is, the spec is what makes the difference. And for this being a second car in the family, the range is not an issue. The one thing which we definitely do not miss is the i3S. So with the facelift, you have the choice of an on-S or the S, and many people are very keen on the S because yes, it does look more aggressive with widened stands and wheel arches, bigger wheels, etc. It also has a little bit more power despite the motor being the same. But for daily use and having driven both versions extensively, the non-S with the 19-inch wheels is the one to go for. We are absolutely in love with the car. Me, as someone who is really much into the gadgets, I appreciate the extra kit. And my mum, as someone who doesn't really care about cars, is the first car when, if someone stops and asks, she's happy to answer all the questions and just prove how much she loves it. So it just goes to show that the i3 really is a fantastic vehicle and it stood the test of time. Speaking of that, if you want to see how it aged over the years of our ownership, I will have a dedicated video coming on that as well. So make sure to subscribe. If you appreciate the insight and how to spot all the features and which ones are worth it, make sure to like the video. And yeah, thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.